we signed a multi-year extension to the Formula 1 licence, which has obviously made things a little bit easier because we're able to plan things a little bit further ahead. So we've undergone a lot of research, looking back at things that people liked or didn't like about our last 2 games, and that sort of shaped one area of the game. What are the things that we've already got that we can improve on, and then also what are we lacking, as well as the internal ideas. So there's kind of 5 or 6 really cool new features. We're only talking about 3 of them here at E3, as well as loads of just general improvements for the game. And it's, you know, how can we turn this into an annual sports franchise like FIFA and iterate it on year and just keep improving it, really. What we're showing today specifically is the first look at the Austin, Texas track. Obviously the last 2 years each has had a new track, so Korea 2010, India 2011. Here we are with Austin, Texas, which we'll show you guys in a minute. So that's a really cool layout. They've taken some of the corners from other tracks, some inspiration. So there's some similar fast section of corners to Silverstone, and there's also a very similar corner to Turn 8 at Turkey. Very long straight as well. Looks like a really good track. We've had some great races there in the studio. The other thing that we've kind of announced already in the first developer diary that we did was we're going to have an introduction to the game this year where it's set in a young drivers test. So this is really not about dumbing the experience down at all, but it's about making F1 a little bit less intimidating to people who maybe don't think this is the game for them, that it's maybe a little bit too hard, they haven't quite got enough time. So the way that the game's going to play out is you're going to get to drive for either Ferrari, McLaren or Red Bull. You start the young drivers test, you just learn the basic controls, what's a race in line, you know, just kind of some of the basic fundamentals. That then unlocks the main game modes, which you can then free to go and play, but you can also come back to the young drivers test and learn some more of the technical aspects of the sport. You know, what does fuel mixture do? How can I use that, dial it up and dial it down? What is curves? What is DRS? What are the rules? You know, where do I deploy it? What's the sort of tyre rules of the sport? Some of the real complexities that perhaps you don't need to understand just to get in and enjoy the game. And then last but not least is localised weather. So in F1 2010, the biggest standout feature we had was the weather system. It looked great and it really mixed up the racing as well. But what we felt over the past few years is it really kind of didn't really adjust itself enough. It was always kind of heavy rain for a large portion of the race, and then maybe it went dry, or it was intermediate, or it was dry conditions. So now we've got a weather front, so it could be raining on just one section of the track, so dry for the rest of it, and then just sort of tiptoe through a particular section. And then it can also just change directions on itself, so it might start to go wet and then come back dry again. So it introduces all these sort of strategic elements of which tyres do I need to be on at this point in time. It really mixes up the racing, especially when you're at the front, because you know you don't want to be the guy necessary to make the first call, make the bad call and go back. But if you're outside of the points, it really mixes things up, because you can jump in, you can make a brave call, and all of a sudden when everyone else is tiptoeing back round to the pits, you're putting in some fast laps. Well, we were lucky enough to go to the young drivers test in Abu Dhabi, and rather than just kind of go along and microphone up a car, as best we can, we're able to do that in the factory. So we put microphones exactly where we wanted them, and you're going to hear a massive difference in the engine audio this year, which really adds to the experience. We were a bit nervous first time in 2010 when we saw what we actually would get for Korea, and it was just kind of this drawing, and we looked at it and we kind of tried to look at where it would be based in real world reference, and it was just kind of an empty field, and we're like, oh man, how are we going to do this? But when we compared it actually with the live feed and tried to move it around, we found that we actually had it pretty spot on. I think if anything, ours looked slightly better. We had more sort of grass rather than mud and various bits and pieces. So same with India last year. With Austin, Texas, we had quite a bit of information come through. First pass we looked at it, we got the sort of basic layout, the length of the corners right. We weren't sure on the height data, but that's come through recently, and you'll see that in the build. There's some great elevation changes in this circuit. So the last thing to come is really just the lighting and then the sponsor passes. So we've got like a team tier structure, and I think over the last few years you found that even when there's been a disparity between driver performances, so last year Nico Rosberg, for example, outshone Michael for the early part of the season, sometimes by maybe up to half a second, but on the grid they were neck and neck because their car was so much better than the next car. That's not been the case this year, so what we're finding is we're just tweaking the way that we work the AI in the game, so that now it's much more based on driver ability. So you're seeing things like Alonso's really pulling out against Massa as his teammate. Michael's improved this year. You're seeing his driving ability come to the fore. So those are the things that we're sort of balancing and fine-tuning around now. There's always a big push in any racing game that you always want to move the car physics forward, which we've done, and you always want to move the AI forward, which we're doing as well. So they're faster around the track. They've got their characteristics, and they're just these natural rivalries will occur because certain drivers look for smaller gaps on the track and they're a bit more aggressive, and you'll start to feel the pressure as a player as well. If you've got Lewis Hamilton or Alonso or Schumacher behind you, you're really beginning to feel that. And not only do you have your championship rival, but they've also got championship rivals as well, and people that they'll sort of naturally be paired at against during a race. So in a recent test that we were doing, we were teed up against, I think it was Felipe Massa, and over the course, he sort of dived into the pits and disappeared for a little bit on a slightly different strategy. But then 40 minutes later, he kind of emerged from the pits, literally right in front of us, and you're going to see these key rivals that you're going to have throughout the season. It's going to be a lot more consistent this year. There's some big plans for what we want to do in terms of a career mode, but it was kind of really difficult to do that in an annual iteration series. So that's something that we'll be talking a little bit more about at Gamescom. There are definitely some improvements to the career mode this year, but I think now that we signed the multi-year deal, we can begin to slot in exactly when we can kind of do the big thing that we've always wanted to do, and just try and get that to fit in as a game mode. But there will be some new game modes in this year's game, which we'll be announcing a bit later on. The game's coming out late September, and it's on Xbox 360, PS3 and PC.